update of how many probably were registered, because the last time I had a number that was.
Okay, we are meeting everybody.
Good morning, everybody.
Welcome.
Good morning.
Hi, everyone. Good morning.
How are you feeling today?
Good morning. Hello, Guy. How are you? Excellent. Guy is one of our, I don't know if we have words yet or titles, but he's one of our superpower skillers. He's come to many sessions, but we love it because he asks really great questions, and he's also like a part of our cat community. So welcome. Good to see you.
I love you guys. You know it.
We feel it. We love you back. So good morning, everyone. Please feel free to let us know where you are dialing in from. So for us in the Central Time Zone, we want to say good morning. It is 10:03 on our side, but one of our guests is dialing in from India, so it's about 8 o'clock on his side. So, you know, it's such a beautiful thing to 8 p.m. on his side. So it's such a wonderful thing to, we were saying just before we started, it's just a wonderful thing to be able to bridge so many gaps and open it up. Even though we've seen some really terrible things via the pandemic, we've also seen this beautiful pivot in how we are able to connect through technology. So I just want to say good morning, good evening, good afternoon, from wherever you're at right now. I'm going to pass it over to my lovely dynamic colleague and fellow CAT. By the way, CAT stands for Career and Transition Services. We should say that because we know it, so we forget to say that what it stands for. So every now and then we see somebody's face like, what do you mean? So CAT stands for Career and Transition Services. We are both working there for McGill University School of Continuing Studies. Allow me to introduce my lovely colleague, Diana Viola.
Thank you, Sita. Sita Maharaj is her name.
Oh yeah.
She's a career advisor CATS, Career Advising and Transition Services at McGill School of Continuing Studies. This is our 4th day of Power Skills. What a wonderful summit we have had, and we want to thank you all for being with us, for staying with us, and for being here to enjoy the presentation of our 2 special guests that my colleague Sita will introduce properly in a minute. But before we get started, and we appreciate if you keep your microphones off, because we are going to play a land acknowledgement. McGill University is on land which has long served as a site of meeting, exchanging amongst Indigenous people. We respect their territory, and for us it's special to recognize their inherent right of the land. So please stay muted because we are going to play the land acknowledgement.
Thank you. It's very imperative for us to highlight that we are on unceded territories, and that we really would like to encourage everyone, if you're not in the Montreal area, but in various parts of Canada and or the world, to also take an opportunity to understand or verify, maybe research the lands by which we are on and we are occupying, and to show the respect required. So we always want to encourage that regardless to where you're from. And I'm going to get things started with this coffee chat. Invite you all to get some tea, some coffee, some water, whatever your likeness is for this morning. And I'm going to start off by welcoming our speaker, Sangeetha Dixit. Allow me to read her bio, if you will. So Sangeetha is passionate about learning and development. She's a professional with over a decade of rich experience in empowering human potential. She works as an employment advisor for a not-for-profit, and she helps her clients tap into their inner strengths and innate strengths to find success. So I feel that we're in for a treat to get a really beautiful experience and exchange. And I'd like to introduce Sudhendra Bagayat, I'm so sorry, Bagayat from India. You're going to let us know exactly where you're dialing in from, but allow me to please introduce him. Sudhendra Bagayat is a human engineer. I actually love that you say that, and I want to dive into that. He is a qualified electrical and electronics engineer with passion for training and developing people in and on their potential. He has over 15 years of experience in learning and development. He has learned to train himself and achieved expertise in using 15 different psychometric assessments and experiential learning tools using activities both indoor and outbound. He is a transactional analysis, a psychometrician, and a lifelong learner. He has attended many training programs to develop himself professionally and personally. He has so many domains of expertise, it's quite astonishing. I'll read you a couple. Presentation skills, team building, outbound building, leadership training, coaching and mentoring, counseling skills. I really have to say your skill set is phenomenal. So enough about us chatting. I'm going to pass it over to you, Sangeetha, and welcome Sangeetha and Sudhendra.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for dialing in today. I know it's a Saturday morning. To wake up early after a heavy week is, even I found it a little challenging. I'm going to be honest. So thank you so much for the opportunity to Team McGill for this. It's wonderful. This is the second time I am with you, working with you, and I really enjoy every experience. Now I work from Toronto. I live in Toronto, and to show my respect as an immigrant to the indigenous peoples, to the natives of this land, I would like to read a land acknowledgement. And I'm going to just use my PowerPoint presentation here. I'm not going to share it because it's my work presentation, but then I will read it out. We acknowledge the land we are meeting on is the traditional territory of many nations, including the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat peoples, and is now home to many diverse First Nations, Inuit, and Métis peoples. We also acknowledge that Toronto is covered by Treaty 13 with the Mississaugas of the Credit. Thank you. So how are we feeling today? I hope you all have your, thank you guys for your heart there. So today is going to be a coffee chat. We will try our best to keep it as informal as possible. We, that was a very premise of us choosing a coffee chat, especially on a Saturday morning. We don't want too many formal things happening, after an entire week of training programs. So in terms of, all right, so I'm going to start off this discussion today with a question that I'm going to throw it at you. If you feel like answering them, feel free to use the chat box. If you feel, hey, you know what, let me just introspect, I don't want to answer, it's totally fine. By the way, if you have any question in between, just please feel free to put them on the chat box. As and when possible, we will be answering them right then and there if it's possible. If we feel it can be answered later, we will park it aside and then come back. All right, awesome. So now coming back to the main question to start off this discussion. Have you ever, in the last so many years that you have interacted with people, especially in a one-on-one conversation, did you know that there are 6 personalities that are involved in that interaction? Anyone who knew that? If not, if you're wondering how sorry, I just muted. Kindly keep your microphones muted during the session. Thank you. Yep, and I agree. Even I did not know that there were 6 personalities involved when there are 2 people interacting. And here's the math. Every one of us within us have 3 personality dimensions when we interact with someone, right? And when I say interact with someone, it need not be just interpersonal communication. It is also intrapersonal communication. Because, hey, at the end of the day, who do we talk with the most in our lives? It's with ourselves. I'm sure you agree. Even now, as I speak, or when Sudhendra speaks, you have these thoughts running in, you're just talking with yourselves, and that's natural for any human being, right? So when there are 2 people interacting, there are 6 personalities, because 3 and 3. And that is the beauty of, bringing in this theory of transactional analysis. Sudhendra, do you want to introduce what is transactional analysis?
Sure. The way I see it, transactional analysis is, for me, it's a like a multiple toolkit built into one, right? Like Sangeetha said, it's an interpersonal and intrapersonal theory. I could use this to understand the communication that is happening between you and me. I could use it to understand child development, which will in turn help me understand how or what possibly could have happened during your childhood, right? It also is a tool that has been implemented by many experts in organizational development, right? It also helps us in understanding our own personal growth, right? It helps us keep a track of that. So, like I said, it's a multi toolkit packed into one, right? And as per ITAA, International Transactional Analysis Association, they define it as a systematic psychotherapy, a systematic growth and psychotherapeutic tool for personal development, right? So that is what is transactional analysis, and I have fallen in love with it for the last 7 years, and it kind of gives me the ability for divining. This person is behaving like this. Probably this is the need. Probably this is what has happened to him to behave like this. So it has provided me with so much of amazing knowledge about human behavior that I can say that this was another turning point in my life. The first one being the handwriting analysis, right? So yeah, I'm not getting there. Over to you, Sangeetha.
Well, you are multi-talented, so I do agree with with your experience. And in fact, we both started our journey in transactional analysis the same year in 2014, but we did it in totally different places, and we didn't realize it until much later that we kind of did it during the same time, but then in different institutes back home. So yeah, I mean, also adding to that, in fact, right now, when we look at the applications of this theory, it can be used in behavioral therapy. It can be used in organizational development, leadership development, team development, and also personal development, additional to clinical therapy and counseling. But we do not get into that because that's not the focus today. Today we are looking more in terms of the leadership potential. And also, let me clarify this because we do have, some of them had sent me questions on my LinkedIn chat asking, when you say leadership, do you mean, I need to be the CEO of a company, or do I have to be, the manager or something like that, So when we talk about leadership here, we do not mean leadership by title. We mean leadership as a potential. So you may be a student, you may be a homemaker, you may be an employee, you may be an intern, you could be anyone, you could be a child and still possess leadership skills, right? So that is what we're going to be talking about today. And that translates into all dimensions of life. So, that's the beauty of this, right? We do not limit our discussion, or the theory does not limit ourselves to positions, right, as a leader, but it's more about the potential. So in terms of, understanding this, let's move on to this question. In fact, we both, Sudhendra and I, were discussing, we kind of, whenever we get on talks, we do end up discussing a lot about human behavior and psychology, sometimes even dwell into spirituality. So we were discussing about this question that I would want to throw it at all of you. Feel free to introspect. If you wish to answer, you can use the chat box. If not, it's okay. But as long as you know what's your answer. The question is, in the last 24 to 48 hours, did you find yourself in any particular situation? It could have been anything at any point of time and anywhere. Did you find yourself acting like your parent? When I say your parent, I do not mean biological parent alone. It could be your foster parents, adopted parents, or other people, couples who may have adopted you, or your teachers, your role models. Could be anyone who played a parental figure in your life, right? So did you find yourself behaving like them at any point of time in the last 24 to 48 hours? That's question one. Question two is, in the last 24 to 48 hours, did you find yourself feeling, thinking, or behaving like the childhood part of yourself? Introspect and see what situations triggered that. Where did you feel certain things, or how did you behave? Did you behave like the child part of yourself, or did you behave like your parental figure or your biological parent, whoever it could be, right? Sudhendra, do you have anything in the last 24?
Here onwards, whenever we say parent, it does not limit to your biological parent or your foster parents. We are talking about any authority figure who has had either power over you or influence over you in a way where you have modeled a part of their behavior or a part of their behavioral response, right? And by child, we are talking about you only, nobody else.
Exactly. And so to give you an example, right, what happened in the last 24 hours, let me think. So last evening at about 9:30, we had a power outage all across, my community. And my first reaction was, I got into panic mode because I wanted to practice for the session, and I wasn't sure how much charge was left in the laptop, and I didn't want to use it. At the same time, I was worried about, okay, what if there is no power to tomorrow morning? And I just went into that, fear cycle and caught myself being in that state of mind for a certain number, of minutes before I kind of, just calmed down and, cool. And I went to Hydro One website and, I did what I had to do. So I changed, my thinking process. So I became aware after a few minutes that, hey, this is not going to help me out. So let me see what I can do, right? What can I do as of now to ensure that, I have some answer, and, I was able to kind of figure out that the power will be back within an hour. So I was okay, right? So that is what, that's called the ego state, right? Or your state of mind. So Sudhendra, would you want to please put the slide? So as much as we don't want to keep the conversation informal, because this theory can get a little overwhelming and it's so deep. We are not dwelling too much into it. We are going to be touching the surface, but just to kind of have a visual representation for you all, we just have a very simple slide that I think Sudhendra, are you sharing it? Yeah, okay.
Sure.
I'll wait for you to. Meanwhile, anyone, do you know what is an ego state? So let me keep my chat box open too, so that, all right, when you look at this image, right, just look at that. You have these two adults or adult figures that, I make out right now. And then there are three other things, as I said, right? Each one of us have three personality dimensions in us. So if you see, when these two people are talking, it can be six personalities who are in conversation, right? So what is an ego state was what we were discussing. It's nothing but, the basic building blocks of personality where, which manifests itself in terms of expression of your thinking patterns. How do you think in a certain situation? How do you feel? So expression of your emotions, your feelings. And how do you evaluate a situation? How do you evaluate a person? Let's say you want to promote someone at work, right? Or you are hiring someone, or you are choosing which job offer to get into. So that's the capacity of evaluating people, evaluating the situation and the persons. And that is what encompasses an ego state. And in this, we have three different states, right? So the first one, I think, Sudhendra, you may have to move. Yeah, there you go. We have the three ego states, that is the parent ego state, the adult ego state, and the child ego state. Please remember that none of us are in one ego state 24/7, right? I mean, we are not all the time in the authoritative mode, neither are we all the time in a submissive or a child kind of a state. But depending on the situation, we do change those, it kind of manifests itself, and that's what it is, right? So what is a parent ego state? Sudhendra, do you want to, take it up?
So simply put, parent ego state is the historical record. When I say historical record, you have copied this. It's not in the current state here and now, okay? You have copied this from your parent or parental-like figures, right? Any kind of a behavior that they have demonstrated with you, to you, or around you, right? For example, let's say, you saw perhaps your father or your mother or your uncle, aunt, or grandfather who had an influence on you. When he or she was under stress, they would start biting their nails, or they would tap their feet, or they would simply shut down, right, under stress. So if you have copied that, right, you are in the stress, under stressful moments, you are behaving like that, then you have copied that into your ego state, your parent ego state, right? So this parent ego state and child ego states can further be divided, right? You might have copied different aspects of the parent ego state. Let's say the parental figure that had an influence on you was quite disciplining, right? But the disciplining approach was very positive, right? They would not hit you, or you never saw them hitting, shouting, yelling, but yet they had this tact for disciplining people, right? You might have developed that in you because you have a role model who has showed a side, one aspect of what we call as critical parent ego state, right? Another parental figure who had an influence on you was quite caring, quite loving, right? Probably unconditionally, right? So maybe you have covered that aspect of the behavior, and it is lodged into your what we call nurturing parent ego state. So parent ego state is split into these two, right? Then we have the adult. It's not split, mainly because it is the human ability to process information in the current moment, right? There are many names given to it. One of them could be called, being mindful, right? So when you're in your adult ego state, you are more or less like a CPU, a central processing unit of the computer, right? You are using logical, reasoning to make a decision, right? So anytime where you are asking for information, where you are weighing pros and cons, where you are trying to solve a problem, anything on those lines, you're tapped into your adult ego state, right? And the last one is again split into two: adapted child and natural child. So just imagine, or just try to recollect how you were, or try to recollect a baby who you have seen, who is probably a 1 year old or less than that, right? How do you see the behavior is? That baby will not bother if it is 2 a.m. and if it is hungry, it will cry and get its demand met, right? If you are behaving like that, people may label you as selfish, self-centered, or whatever, but actually speaking, you are operating from your natural child ego state, right? Other characteristics of this ego state could be you being, happy, laughing, poking fun, right? Or being enthusiastic, or even being sexual is considered, being flirtatious is coming from the natural child ego state, right? Whereas the adapted child, like the name says, you have been forced to adapt to the people around you, to the rules of the family, to the culture you are growing up in, to the society's norms, right? Whatever behaviors you have had to develop in order to survive, all of that are lodged into what we call adapted child ego state. So these are not concrete boxes, but these are dynamic behavioral responses which tend to come out of you whenever you are in a particular situation, right? However, there is one challenge with it. If you have not seen, if you have not come across during your, developing years, you have not come across any parental figures who have shown you the nurturing side of being a parent, right? You did not come across a teacher, an elder, a grandfather, mother, uncle, or even a stranger who has shown the nurturing side of being human. You may never know what it means to behave from this particular ego state, right? Likewise, if you have never been put into rules, right? You may never have developed an adapted child ego state. But that does not mean you can't develop. And there is nothing wrong in that, right? It has simply molded your behavior in a particular way. So the beauty of this approach is you can change your behavior at will at any given point in time. All you need to do is to first become aware of it, and you are tapped into your adult ego state, right? It's as simple as that. And from a leadership point of view, when you're operating from a parent ego state, you are basically looking for dominating the other person. It could be by love or it could be by force. When you're using your nurturing parent ego state, you are trying to dominate the person with love, right? When I say dominating, you are wanting to wanting the other person to behave in a certain way, right? That's what I mean, simply put, right? I'm sorry. When you're approaching the other person from a parent ego state, which is the state of dominance, sometimes there is a pushback. Why? Because the other person is not is not willing to operate from the child ego state. So we will come to that in just a few moments. So when you're operating from parent, the other person's child ego state gets triggered. And if the person is not comfortable, you will experience a pushback. So it's always advisable. It's always great if you can approach the situation from an adult perspective, right? It is the adult where we are in a mutual, respectful, mode, right? It's of mutual respect. The adult ego state says, I and you are equal, right? I respect you as an individual. And when you're operating from the child ego state, you are coming across from a dependence mode, right? So be it an adapted child or a natural child. So let's say, a simple cry for help means that you are looking for some guidance, which is basically operating from child ego state. Now, let me reiterate that the statement again, which Sangeetha said. It is not bad, or it is it is okay to operate from a child ego state. We all do, right? Sometimes we need to. None of these ego states are bad or good, so don't get into that judgment, right? It's only about using the appropriate ego state for the appropriate situation. Let's say your reportee is asking you for help. You can't help but get into parent ego state. But are you using critical parent, being harsh, taking away the other person's self-esteem, or helping the other person guide, or rather, guiding the other person? That itself determines the outcome of the situation. So anytime you are operating from your parent ego state and you're trying to take away the other person's personal power or self-esteem, you are operating from a negative mode, right? So become aware of that. Ask yourself the question, what is it that you want, right? In any situation, when we ask this question to ourselves, what is it that I want from this situation, right? You are tapping into your adult ego state, and the situation will become much more clearer. And this is a skill. It will require practice. Maybe you will not be able to do it the first time. Maybe you will do it the 10th time. But tapping into it is where you're activating your adult ego state, right? And as a leader, you need to be respectful of the other person as well, right? Sangeetha, over to you.
Yep. Thank you. I agree, Sudhendra. I mean, I was just thinking about, so many examples, as you said, was just going through with our day-to-day lives of how, we kind of change our modes and just being aware. And that's such an important tool. The first step to leadership, right? Or self-awareness. What are my strengths? What are my weaknesses? How am I behaving in a given situation? And that's where, I see Zita's question. It's an amazing one on chat box. Will we learn tips to acknowledge these states and let them go if we identify that if we don't want to continue or mirror, continue to mirror, sorry. So yeah, of course, Zita, that's a wonderful question. And the very fact that you've used the word acknowledge itself shows that you're ready to, be open to change. You're ready to make those necessary changes. And as Sudhendra said, it's about being, aware and making the transition. Our natural tendency in a given situation may take us to either parent mode or child mode because of so many years of experience. Now we need to understand, sorry about that. Some of us are in, with so many years of experience. Some of us probably are in our 30s, some of them are in your 60s, some of you probably are in your 20s. I'm not sure, right? So whatever number of years of experience and influence you have had, it's not that easy to let it go. But then that is where the key is, right? So the main tip for anyone to, to acknowledge and let it go is be aware. So that's just the example from yesterday, right? I went into the child state when when there was a power cut, right? The panic mode, feeling helpless, feeling fearful of what's going to happen tomorrow. Will I be able to join the call, or do I have to go somewhere else, plug my laptop and work? What's going to happen was running in my mind. I was in the child state, and it was actually adapted child, where I come from a country where, especially when I grew up, there were a lot of power outages. So I know the feeling of not being able to do my homework on time, not being able to study for my exam because of a power outage. And that translated to the fear that I had yesterday. But after once I was aware of where my mind was, I turned my thoughts into adult state, saying, all right, let me see what I can do with this. I can't run around asking people here. So what can I do? I looked up on the internet. I looked up on Twitter if there's any update from Hydro One. I went to their website and I saw if I can report a power outage. I saw that there were people who were already reporting it, and there was an estimated time. And I knew that I don't have to panic. And that is where, you take ownership of the situation. It's very natural for us to dwell into, either the parent or the child ego state, but you can always come back. The choice is always there for us, regardless of what situation we are in.
May I interject and ask a question, or would you rather us hold off?
Please go ahead with the question.
It's okay. So I actually feel like it's more maybe of an admission, but I'm trying, as you're discussing this, to go into the recesses of my mind to identify where it's coming from. For example, typing in the chat, I feel always a level of hesitation, always. And I recognize that I seem very active in the chat, but I'm always hesitating, like, is this a good idea? What if my question seems silly? What if, somebody doesn't like the way I'm asking, or I'm not able to articulate, or am I monopolizing? Like, I kind of go through this thing where I'm kind of downward spiraling, and then somebody will sidebar me, direct message me, like, thanks for asking that. And it's almost as if, like, that fear that I have, and I hesitate. Sometimes I go back, I remove it. Like, I do this every single time. It makes me question where this, I feel sometimes it's like an imposter syndrome. Like, where is this stemming from? Because I'm not afraid to ask questions. I'm not afraid to use my voice, but then I am. Right? So it's not only in the chat, it's also like in a real life situation, but this is like the best example I could use. I'm so curious to understand, how do I identify which state of said ego this is from? Or is this me wanting to be small as a woman? I'm taught not to speak up. Is this me wanting to not be somebody who's a know-it-all and or be too inquisitive? Or I'm curious to understand how I could unpack why I don't feel strong or brave enough to ask.
Right.
Because in the end, I ask anyways.
There are two answers to it, Zita. There are two ways of looking at it. Interpersonally speaking, you are approaching the situation from your adapted child. Okay. So your adapted child has learned or it has been taught to feel small. Right? These are all the taught notions, taught concepts, right? But you're not born like that, right? So this is your adapted child ego state, which is popping up. But you're probably, there's also a, adult or a critical parent, a healthy critical parent, which is helping you overcome that. Or probably even nurturing parents, which is it's okay to ask.
Okay, so to jump on top of this now, how do I lead fearlessly or with this in mind? And how do I encourage those around me not to have this trepidation as in various forms of leadership. So as an actual parent, I wouldn't want for my children to feel trepidation. And in a employee worker situation, I am working under folks and I want to feel like my voice is heard. But in my outside life, I'm a leader in various ways, and I want for people to always be able to approach me with an openness and not be afraid to ask a question. So outside of saying this is a safe space, how do I make sure that I welcome those thoughts? And how do I mirror that I'm not afraid to ask questions? I feel like this might be loaded, but please tell me.
No, it's not loaded. It's generic. Sangeetha, please go on.
No, it's. I was just saying that it's not loaded at all.
Okay.
It's to kind of just as an adapted child so when you are interacting with your child, for example, right? Because you gave that that example. Let's say you are there's a certain situation, and let's say that the child did not do well in public speaking, for example, or maybe the child asked a question, and maybe their friends, maybe cousins, maybe someone laughed at the child, right? That translates into a message to the subconscious in your child or in someone's child, it could be anyone, right? That, oh, okay, I can't ask questions. I get mocked at or I get laughed at whenever I ask questions. I don't like this experience. Let me shut off. So that is what translates when you're an adult, where you would probably be, we have seen, in fact, Sudhendra and we have coached so many leaders when we worked together back home, when I was back home, they are probably sitting in CEO chairs, but then there is these childhood traumas. And I use the word trauma with conscious, because it is, for a 1-year-old or a 2-year-old, it is too much to be laughed at, to be mocked at because they asked a question, or even a 5-year-old, let's say in the school, right? And I've had those situations and I had to break through them. And that's where, you kind of, it's all about how do you communicate, even within the team. So even now what I do with my clients, whenever I coach them or do my workshops, is always just let them know that there's absolutely no judgments with whatever questions that they ask, right? There's no judgments. There's no such thing as stupid questions. There's no such thing as wrong questions, right? There could be a wrong answer to certain things, but definitely not a wrong question, right? So I think that's where it translates to, from even when you are as a leader communicating to your team, to your family member, to your child, could be anyone, to be in the adult ego state, right? Because the parent ego state wants the team member to do what they want. But instead, when you are in an adult ego state, you are treating them as equals, regardless of what the age gap is or what the relationship is between you and the other person. So Sudhendra, what are your thoughts?
Yeah. So to add to what Sangeetha said, the first thing when I'm talking, when you say, how do I build this environment where people are opening up or feeling trusting about me, the first thing that you need to understand is to trust is a natural child instinct, right? Unless and until there is a trauma or there is a breach of trust, the child would always want to trust one another, right? But as we grow up, the amount of trauma, the amount of breach of trust has piled up so much that we become cautious in trusting one another, right? So when you are when you're looking at leading people anywhere, the first thing that you need to know is, or to understand, try to understand at least, is what is it that they need in this moment, right? When I say need, I'm not just talking about the physical needs. I'm not talking about a chair or table. No, I'm talking about the emotional sense of security, the emotional needs that we have, right? We all had, it's in our study, we have this talk, right? Or we call ourselves broken selves, right? Nobody here is perfect. So we all are broken pieces. We all are what we call damaged goods, right? So we are still learning in this process. So when you want to set tone from the beginning, you need to use your adult, right? That is where you can tap into the other person's needs, your own need, right? And you need to put it in place, right? How do I identify all this? There is behaviors that are associated with each of these ego states. There is body language cues that you can pick up, which are in connection with each of these behaviors. And there are certain kind of words, right? Let's say you are operating from a critical parent mode, right? So the critical parent is more to do with making giving directions, or it's about controlling the other person's behavior or situation, right? Trying to take the control. Whereas the nurturing parent, the kind of words that they use is more about acknowledging the other person's needs, right? A simple "I love you," or a simple "Do you need a glass of water?" Things like that. You are operating from the nurturing parent ego state, right? Whereas when we are talking about adapted child, what we are looking at is acknowledgement, right? Acceptance from the other person. And a natural child, the natural child is the most powerful ego state among all of these. And if used positively, you will be, one of the most trusting person, anybody can have around, right? People will trust you just like that because you are tapping into the natural child, and there is no facade. The natural child, a baby does not know facades, right? If it is angry, it is angry. If it is happy, it is happy, right? There is nothing you can do to make the child, behave otherwise, right? So that is, those are the kind of words you will use when you are in your natural child mode also. It's like, I want this, right? Or I'm sad, I'm happy. So all these kinds of words where you are expressing your needs, where you are expressing your wants or desires, you're operating from your natural child.
Yeah, so I also, Zita, thank you, Sudhendra. Zita, I also saw your statement here saying, I would imagine positive affirmations and mantras said daily would help. I agree. However, if it's a lot of, even when I used to do these motivational, inspiring workshops, right? I always say that it's not just the words that you say, right? Like, let's say that I suffer from low self-esteem, an example, right? But then I am in this workshop, or I just tell myself saying, oh, you know what, I'm confident, and I see myself as a great leader, etc., etc. I use all these beautiful words, but if I don't believe in them, there's absolutely no use in using those words. Words are powerful, I agree. I believe in affirmations. I use them. I have my vision boards stuck in my, what do you say, in the bedroom, right? I use them on an everyday basis, but unless and until it is internalized and you really break through those shackles, right? Because when, let's say that, someone mocked at me when I was a child for something, these are all examples, right? And I have this huge thing sitting in me, which is a blockage. It's an energy blockage. Until and unless I address that and remove it, no matter what affirmations and mantras I listen to or I tell on an everyday basis, it's difficult to work, right? I'm not saying it's impossible, but it's so much more, it's like, breaking the wall with a small chisel instead of just putting a bomb there and, taking it off. So that's the kind of, genre. So yeah, we can. address. And of course, we can help you out in case anyone needs, further help. Feel free to reach out. And, Sudhendra also has designed an assessment, and we'll be able to help together, right? We do have 10 minutes, almost 8 minutes, I think. So we just have one more concept to cover. So now we were talking about the ego states, right? So this is just what one person. Now imagine there are two people. We are just keeping it very simple. We are not getting into the group dynamics. Just with two people, you and your spouse, you and your child, yourself and your employee, could be anyone, right? Now there are three different styles of when you interact. There is also a response that you get, and this is called transaction. It's basic. You transact in the bank, and it's the same thing, right? You say something, and there is a response that you get. So there are three types of it. The first one, as you see, is parallel, right? Let us say that you are, you see that there's some reports that one of the your employees or one of your team members made a mistake in, right? So you call them and say, hey, you know what, there are so many errors in the report that you have sent. What happened? Why are you making so many errors? Which state are you coming from? You're coming from critical parent. Look at the arrow, right? It's coming from a parent state because there was there were so many errors, or even one error, right? Whatever. The moment you say that, if the person at that point of time feels or is in a child ego state, right? They can probably respond as, oh, I'm so sorry. It won't happen again. I'm really sorry about that. Please don't fire me. There's a lot of fear that comes in. They could also respond from a different ego state, but right now we're just looking at the parallel and an example of a parallel ego state. So there is a direct, and it could be adult to adult also, right? For example, let's say you ask someone, hey, what's the time? And then they respond. If it's, if the arrows were towards adult ego states, they would probably just say the time, right? That's it. And they're done. You just move on. There's no judgments. There's no asking, hey, what you have a watch with you. Why are you, or you have your phone. Why are you not looking at the time on your device? There's no such things that happen. So it's very simple, very neat in terms of adult to adult. But then this parent to child, you see that, right? And that is where conflicts start to arise. The second type of
to add to what Sangeetha said, there can be about 9 different kinds of parallel transactions that can happen between two people, right? Parent to child, parent to adult, parent to parent, right? 3 into 3. So parallel transactions can happen, or let's say, you are intending to dominate the person with either a critical parent or a nurturing parent, and the person is responding from either adapted child or natural child. You're having a parallel transaction. That's awesome. And it can go on forever. That kind of conversation, that kind of transaction can theoretically go on forever, right? However, the healthiest transaction where both of you and me will feel respected is when we are transacting from adult ego state. Remember, adult ego state is that of mutual respect, right? So from a leadership point of view, if you want to develop a healthy team culture, start using your adult and treat everybody as equal, even though they might be reporting to you, even though the person might have less experience. But when you start treating them with adult, when you start operating from adult, you will see that you have tremendous amount of confidence in yourself. You are respecting yourself. You're also respecting the other person, which develops the overall morale of the individuals, right? Sangeetha, over to you for the next one.
Oh yeah, sure. Thank you, Sudhendra. The next type is the cross transaction. Now, if you see the arrow marks, right? Now, let's say you had a bad day at the office, or you're just not happy, and then you just you meet one of your subordinates, probably, right, during one of the meetings, and then you realize that something that went wrong. For example, let's say that there was a file that got deleted by mistake. And then you're like, did you just lose the files forever? How could you do this? How can you be so irresponsible? You know, I mean, I never expected this of you. You know, you come from a critical parent state. And let us say this colleague is also in a critical parent state, for example, right? They're going to be like, don't blame me. I already emailed you the files and I deleted them from my system. That's what the procedure is, right? So why are you asking me for it? You see now there is two people. There are two people who are worried about the files being deleted, but then, you know, the approach that they have taken at that point of time is being critical parent towards each other. So each one is questioning the others. And this is where, you know, it can get into so many, you know, confrontations, and, you know, you're just not happy. And there's no set result, right? I mean, it's a win-lose or a lose-lose situation in this kind of a thing. And even though, let us say that you are still able to retrieve the data, you have kind of lost on the, you know, on the rapport, on the relationship kind of a thing, where, you know, there's a little, one of them ends up feeling disrespected. And that's the cross transaction.
In short, to add to what Sangeetha said, in short, anytime you're seeing that communication is not happening, right? You're not getting the desired result, you're cross transacting.
Perfect.
Over to you, Sangeetha, for the next.
Yes, so the third type is called the ulterior transaction. Let's take a simple example, all right? You see the green arrow there. So there is this, let's say that you were late to work this particular morning, whether you had to log in or you walked into the office, however, and your boss asks you, why are you late? Right? It's a simple question. Or even let's say that or he asked what happened, right? It's a simple question. And, you know, you answered. Sudhendra, can you please put the other arrow mark also? Okay. So you answer them saying, sorry about the delay, or you just say, you know, the Wi-Fi wasn't working at home, or you say, I missed the transit and that's why I'm late, right? So the conversation, if you see in green arrow, it is adult to adult, right? However, there's a catch here with the red arrow marks. From the previous slide that we had, you know, the person, even though the boss asked, why are you late? And it looked like it was just a regular adult conversation, they probably are thinking, oh my God, I can't believe you're late again, right? So they probably are approaching the question with a critical parent mind, but then, you know, cascading and, you know, having a facade of being an adult in an adult ego state and just asking, coming across as non-judgmental. And on the other side, you who were asked a question, now your mind races to sometime in the childhood where probably you were late to school and you were asked, right? Maybe you, or maybe you were late to, you know, dinner, and your parents or anyone in the house, the parental figure, questioned you, why are you late, right? And you probably got punished. So your child, you know, kind of triggers there. Although you answer as an adult, you are thinking, oh my God, I can't believe I'm just getting asked these questions. I don't know. I know that I don't know how he's going to take it. Am I going to be in trouble? Is it going to affect my, you know, my records, my reputation in the company? There's so many unnecessary fears that come in. So the transaction could look like there is absolutely nothing else happening, but then there is a lot of subconscious plays happening, right? So that is why this third style is called ulterior style of, you know, your transaction. Sudhendra, do you have? So it's 11:01, so we'll probably take just one more minute if that's okay, and, you know, because we started at, thank you.
So an ulterior transaction is the unhealthiest one, typically because you are not telling what you want directly. You're not stating your needs directly, right? And I'm going a little off track or probably skipping things here. But when you indulge yourself in ulterior transactions, you are also starting games, the psychological games with another individual. And as per Eric Berne, the father of transactional analysis, games are the unhealthiest way of achieving what you need, or fulfilling your needs and wants, right? So they are also kind of tiring. They're also pushing you towards the unhealthy decision, or the so-called destiny that you have decided for yourself, and you're pushing yourself towards that.
In fact, I have just in the chat box, I have left a recommendation for a book that's Games People Play. It's an amazing, amazing book. I've read it. He has read it. And we also have another ebook. It is by, who was that, Sudhendra? Sorry,
I can share this book called TA Today by Ian Stewart. So this guy has simplified the concept. If you're so interested, you could take a read, or you could always reach out to me. I can help you with that.
So we will see if we can share the book. We can probably put it in a drive and send. We do not have Games People Play with us, but we do have TA, the other one. Sorry, I keep forgetting. What's that, Sudhendra? What was that?
Sure.
The second.
TA Today.
TA Today, yes, thank you. Yes, sorry about that. Yeah. And so, there's so much more. I agree, Zita. I was kind of going through the chats. There's so much more that we can know. Unfortunately, with the time that we have left, we can always continue this one-on-one if you wish to. So this is my email ID. Learning Sphere is something that, I envision sometime in the future to be, a brand for me. So I've already kind of, I'm already in that cycle of manifesting, exactly, manifesting. And I do have an Insta page for this, but I'm going to be honest, I'm not too active on it, but I kind of try and, go on it to kind of post some things. I'm not good with reels or videos, and, that's just not my thing. But then I do, if at all you want to check it out, but then it's not, nothing. But I'm always active on LinkedIn though. So I
shared both of your LinkedIn's in the chat.
Oh yeah, thank you. Yeah.
And just so you know, we are not, because of privacy issues, we're not allowed to give you the emails. However, if you're interested in the chat,
we will send it to you.
You can send your emails in the chat, and then you can also send it over to us, and we can send over whatever material. Like, just so we have also, we're gatekeeping. We're not permitted to do that piece. I know we're over by a couple of minutes, so I want to thank you very much for bringing this up, bringing this to the surface, and allowing us an opportunity to kind of start ruminating on various things that we can check for ourselves and we can identify in others. Without going into too much, I saw that Anna had a question that was actually really, it was so relevant to where we're at. She asked about how would you manage, I'm just trying to find it. Oh, perfect. I didn't know that you had a moment to type in the chat. Okay, great. It's just been such an interesting ride, and I was writing notes and things. So thank you so much to both of you for your time, for making an effort to be with us, at various time zones. I really do appreciate that. And if you do, I invite anybody who's still on the call, if you want to put your email in the chat, if you're open to that, feel free. So then you can interface directly with both of them. If not, we'll send over the materials when we can. Really, we appreciate you. I just want to say on behalf of CATS, thanks for bringing this coffee chat to us. Lots of really interesting information. And I also want to encourage you all, even though it's our last day, we still have tons of activities going on, and we have a lot of more speakers. So if you haven't already, please check out who else you might be interested in. I'm just going to send that in the chat as well if you haven't had a moment to see the new speakers. And I sincerely want to thank you for, giving us your energy, your time, and bringing some really interesting, relevant topics and styles of communication and interactions to us. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. It was a pleasure and it was amazing. And yes, feel free to reach out to us if you need coaching or even just to know more. We will be more than happy to help you. Thank you, everyone. Have a wonderful.
I've not even scratched the tip of the iceberg.
I know, right? There's still so much. Yeah, we have been discussing for like 7 years now, and it's still not done. So yeah, it's a lot, but then I'm glad that you all got the glimpse of it, and that's where progress is. So
perfect.
Have a wonderful weekend, and
yes, thank you.